Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, True Crime Stories. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe so you can hear more. Thanks for stopping by. This is the story of missing man Robert Alex Easterling. He's been missing since April 20th, 2022. He's a white male with brown hair and hazel eyes, 5'9", 160 pounds. The age of the time of his disappearance was 30 years of age. He was last seen wearing a black t-shirt with a white Egyptian design on the front, blue jeans, and tan military-style boots. He has the tattoo of a large cross on his back. Here are some details from his case. On April 20th, 2022, Alex Easterling's mother picked him up and took him to purchase a new phone. Afterwards, the two of them headed toward Easterling's home in Holmes County, Mississippi. As they made their way into Pickens, Mississippi, Easterling asked if they could stop at a convenience store so he could grab a pack of cigarettes. When he returned to the car, he told his mom that he wanted her to drop him off at one of his friends' houses on Stockyard Road, and he told her that he would get a ride home. When they arrived in front of the friend's home, his mother asked who was the property owner. Easterling told her that the person that owned the property's name was Deward Anderson. His mother texted herself the name and she dropped a pin, like a Google Maps pin, so she would know the location. Now, Alex's mom had a reason for doing this, and at this point, I'm going to get into a little bit more about Alex's background. Alex was born in 1992 to a single mother who was a teenager at the time, Ashley Easterling. Now, along with her parents, Alex was raised. His father didn't really have any part in his life. I don't know if he knew his father at all or if his father just chose not to be a part of his life. So his grandparents, along with his teenage mom, raised him. And Alex was described as a child as being a typical kid. He was a Boy Scout. He liked to skateboard. He loved to read. He was into dinosaurs, and he liked to build things. He liked to explore building and working on things. Alex was described as a kid as being someone who liked to joke and make people laugh. He got along well with other people. He got along really well with his family, was really close to his family. Now, around the time that Alex was in middle school, he and his mom moved to a town called Brandon, Mississippi, where she went to take a job. It was around this time that Alex began to get into a little bit of trouble and started smoking pot. At that point, it was nothing really major. He was just experimenting with a little bit of pot smoking, a new crowd of friends. And to make matters worse, it was around this time that his grandfather was deployed to the Middle East. And he was Alex's father figure. He'd been the only real father figure that Alex had had in his life. And this was really hard for Alex to, have his grandfather be sent away at this time in his life. So Alex started to have problems in school, and his mother decided to put him into a Christian boarding school called French Camp Academy, and he started to do well there. He was really into science, and they say that he became really close to a science teacher. And sadly, the science teacher later passed away, and this really took a toll on Alex. It was really just a difficult time for him in his life. So once again, Alex started to have problems. I don't know if he was kicked out of this school or if his mother just chose to remove him. He went back to Madison High School, and at the age of 17, he got arrested for drugs. So instead of Alex going to jail at such a young age, he was enrolled in this program it was a regimented inmate program that was kind of like a boot camp style program. And um, in this program, he served in this program for 9 months instead of going into the traditional jail or prison at this point, and he got 5 years probation. Now, despite the fact that Alex was in this program, he was arrested once again, and this time he was charged for having crystal meth. So things were starting to take a turn, and while he was offered this opportunity to do better, he just continued down the wrong road. Now, around 2016 or so, he met a woman online and they developed a relationship, and this led to the birth of his daughter in 2017. Now, right after his daughter was born, Alex agreed to go into a rehab program, a long term rehab program in Louisiana. And he went to this rehab program, and eventually, after so long, I couldn't find anything to say how long he stayed there, but after a while, his insurance stopped paying for it, and he was forced to leave this rehab. Now, not long after coming out of this rehab, Alex once again began using drugs, and at one point, he fell asleep behind the wheel of a car and was in a very bad car accident. I couldn't find anything to say whether or not he was charged with DUI or drug use while driving. If they believe that he was under the influence and passed out, or it just says that he fell asleep at the wheel and was in a very bad car accident. Now, after this car accident, Alex once again agreed to go back into rehab. And it was during this time that his girlfriend, the mother of the little girl, his child, moved in with his grandparents, and they were helping to take care of her and the child. When Alex came out of rehab, the relationship started to fall apart, and she left. And she left behind the little girl with Alex and Alex's family. So Alex did his best over the next year or so to stay clean, to stay out of trouble, and he he would relapse back and forth, and things were just not great. His family, for the most part, was caring for his daughter. Now, this was around the time that COVID restrictions started to come into play, and he wasn't able to, you know, get out and do as much. And he was getting COVID um, stimulus money, and his family says that he in turn used this money for drug use. Now, Alex was once again arrested, went into jail, and things started to spiral even more for him. Now, his mother, he had just gotten out of jail. He didn't have a cell phone, so his mother agreed to help him to get a cell phone. She purchased a cell phone for him, and she set it up, and she had access to his Google account. And she was able to install a tracking mechanism on the phone through Google so that she could keep up with his phone. This is the reason why when he asked to be dropped off at this man's house, this Deedward Charles, who was known as Chucky, and I'll get a little bit more into his story as we go on. But that day when she dropped him off, she pinned his location. She kept all this information in the phone so that she could keep track of where he was at. Now, this D. Edward Chucky Anderson was known in town, was rumored to have been known as the local heroin dealer. Now, his mother didn't know this at the time, and she dropped him off there. He said, I'll get a ride home. Now, in another story that I read about him, it said that he had actually been living rent-free in a house that belonged to this Anderson. So I don't know if he was planning on going back to his mother's house or if he was staying at this free rent home of this Anderson. And some people wondered why this man was letting him live rent free in a house. Some people believe that he was selling drugs for him. Um, this was just some different rumors that were talked about later as to his relationship with this Anderson. So now we get back to the point where his mother has dropped him off at this home. She goes home that night. She texts him, lets him know she's made it home. She doesn't hear from him. The next day comes and goes. No one's heard from him. They're trying to locate him with his new phone. And at this point, his grandfather reports him missing to the local sheriff. Now the sheriff, they told the sheriff where he was dropped off at, and he said he would go by and visit this man. Now, in the story that I heard about this, the sheriff made no indication that he was even aware of who this Anderson man was, despite the fact that everybody in the community knew him as the local drug dealer. And being that this was the sheriff of the county, you would expect that he would kind of have knowledge of this man's reputation and stories about him, even if they were true or not true. He told his mom to text him when she got home. He walked away from the vehicle at around 8:15 p.m. She arrived at her home just before 9. She texted him and told him that she made it home okay. By the next morning, he still had not responded to her text. She became worried at this point. She was already worried, but she became more worried when he still hadn't made it home or called or texted or anything by the next day. On the following day, April the 22nd, 2022, Easterling's grandfather contacted the Holmes County Sheriff, Willie March. He asked that the sheriff do a welfare check for Easterling at the home on Stockyard Road. Willie March went out to the home and asked Deedward Anderson about the whereabouts of Easterling. He stated that when Easterling was dropped off at his home, the two of them stood on the front porch for a little while. And he said he went back into the house to grab a t-shirt, and when he came back outside, his friend was gone. Later that day, Easterling's grandfather went out to the property, and Anderson gave him a different story. He said that basically he went into the house to get his phone, and when he came back out, Easterling was gone. He gave yet one more statement of the events when he was questioned by a deputy. He told the deputy that he went inside the house to get his cigarettes, and when he came back outside, Easterling was not there. So he gave 3 different versions of why he went into the house, but basically it was all the same. He went inside for a minute, he comes back out, and Easterling's gone. And he doesn't say if he reached out to try to contact him and say, "Where'd you go? Why'd you take off?" An official missing persons report was filed for Easterling at that time. Sheriff Willie March told Easterling's family that he was going to go out to that property to to issue a search warrant, and that he would include all the outside buildings. But as of today, 3 years have passed and a full search of that property has never been conducted. After getting cell phone data from Easterling's phone, pings confirmed that he was at Anderson's home between 8:15 and 9:30. At 9:27 p.m., Easterling's phone pinged at a location just a little farther away from the home. It was near the gates of a large farm. The phone remained in that location until around 3:30 in the morning, and then all data stopped. Easterling's family requested that tracking be done on his phone. Holmes County Sheriff's Department requested data beginning at 10 p.m. on April the 21st. So his cell phone remained active until 3:30 in the morning, which would have been on the 21st at around 3:21 a.m. The sheriff started tracking the phone back to 10 p.m. on the 21st. Now, this says this was well after the last time of contact and the last time of a transmission from the cell phone. On April the 28th, 2022, a search was conducted at the Anderson home. They brought out 2 teams of tracking and cadaver dogs. Anderson did not want the search to be done, but eventually relented, allowing officers. He made a few phone calls and agreed to allow them to search. He said that the search could only be conducted of the home and the front of the home because Easterling never went into his backyard and they had no reason to search back there. As the search dogs began to search, they began to follow a trail into the backyard. They were showing interest toward the back of the property. Anderson began to get angry and told searchers that he had not given them permission to search in the backyard. Well, I don't know the protocol and the law and what the search warrant specifically was looking for. But if the dogs are showing interest in the backyard and the homeowner all of a sudden starts putting up a fight, wouldn't that tell the cops there's more reason for us to go back in there and search? They said that Anderson became irate and the searchers, fearing for their safety, terminated the search. Well, I wouldn't have terminated the search. If he became irate and was lashing out at the officers, I would have put him into the back of the police car for his own safety and continued the search. On April the 29th, 2022, Easterling's family received a call from the Goodman police chief stating that buzzards were flying low around exit 146, which is very close to the property on Stockyard Road. Mississippi Highway Patrol took out drones over the area, but they were unable to see anything. On May the 2nd, 2022, Holmes County Sheriff's Department requested that Anderson voluntarily come in for questioning and asked him to take a polygraph test. He agreed to come in, but he was over an hour late. He refused to be questioned, and he refused to undergo a polygraph. He stated he had hired a lawyer, and he got up and left the interview. He has never been questioned or given a polygraph as of today. On May the 4th, 2022, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation issued a search warrant for equipment. They wanted to put out surveillance equipment of the Anderson home, and they wanted a search warrant to trace the phone records of the home. It was discovered that much of the surveillance equipment at the home had been removed. I think what they're talking about is cameras. But when they issued this warrant to go out to confiscate these items, they found that it had been removed. The hard drive was still available. Easterling's family reviewed the footage in February of 2023 and the police also noted that there were significant gaps. There were missing segments between 8:26 p.m. and 8:54 p.m. And they picked back up for about 8 minutes between 8:54 and 9:03. We know his mother dropped him off there at 8:15. She sent herself a text message of this man's name and the location of the home. And so he was there for all of about 15 minutes when the footage suddenly stops. But between 8:26 and 8:54 p.m. there's a gap where there's no footage from the cameras. and then again at 9:03 p.m. and 9:54 p.m. Texts and calls from Anderson to Easterling were recorded from before Easterling's arrival, and 1 minute before the footage resumed, Anderson sent a text message to Easterling at 8:36 p.m. There was an outgoing call from his phone to another individual that lasted 26 seconds. So they got the phone calls from when Easterling and Anderson had spoken before Easterling showed up at his house. And Anderson sent a text to Easterling at 8:36 p.m. There was an outgoing call to another person that lasted 26 seconds. On May 27, 2022, a large search was conducted with over 100 volunteers, 9 certified canine search and rescue handlers, the Lexington police chief, and several off-duty law enforcement officers from outside the area. Even though the dogs continued to show interest from the back of the property, this would have been considered the backyard of Anderson's home. There was no personnel from the Holmes County Sheriff's Department involved. So the Holmes County Sheriff's Department seems to me like, I don't know what their connection to this Anderson man was. I don't know if they were trying to cover something up or if they really just didn't want to be involved in this. But while these other people were out bringing out canines and volunteers and sheriffs and off-duty police officers from other towns in the area came out, the Holmes County Sheriff's Department kind of sat on their thumbs. Kind of reminds me of the story that I did about Candy Green Gonzalez in Floyd County, Kentucky, when people were out searching for her, and the Floyd County Sheriff's Department is kind of sitting there twiddling their thumbs. So nobody from the Holmes County Sheriff's Department went out on the search, and deputies with the department have told the Easterling family that they were ordered to stay away from the search and not have any communication with the family. On September 3rd, 2023, a fire broke out at the property at Stockyard Road. It destroyed the area the search dogs had showed interest in. Holmes County Sheriff's Department has not named a person of interest or a suspect in Alex Easterling's disappearance. The man who was known to have had the last contact has never been questioned, and his property has never been fully searched. Now, if anyone has any information about Alex Easterling, they can contact Crime Stoppers at 1-888-827-4637. Before I move on into the next part of this story, I would just like to remind everybody, if you haven't already, to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. This Chucky started giving the sheriff and the other deputies who came out and asked questions about him these conflicting stories. They were basically all the same story, but he just kind of changed it up each time. I'll point this out while it's fresh in my mind, is that later on when he does agree to a search, he tells them at no point was Alex ever in his backyard, so he doesn't want them to search in the backyard. But he tells the sheriff that he goes into the house to get some items. At one point it's a shirt, at one point it's a cell phone, but each time he says when he comes back outside, Alex is not there. So how did he know that Alex had never gone into the backyard? The dogs hit on the backyard. The dogs were interested in searching and going toward the backyard. So how could he sit there and say he was never in the backyard if he claims he didn't know where he went? And why did the sheriff agree to not get a search warrant for the backyard Did he not question, well, how do you know he didn't go out into the backyard since you claim you don't know where he went? Now, because the mom continued to pressure law enforcement, on May the 6th, they issued a search warrant for the property for the video cameras, surveillance cameras that this Chucky had at his house. Now, the family was shown these videos, and there were missing time frames. And they don't know if these were removed by law enforcement so that the family wouldn't see something, or if these were removed prior to this man turning these over to the police. They begin to have their suspicions of the law enforcement themselves because they were not getting cooperation and the kind of help that they thought that they would get from the sheriff's office. They felt like that these sheriff's deputies and the sheriff himself was kind of just hoping that this would all become hush hush and that this family would just let this alone. They weren't doing anything, in the family's opinion, to really get out there and try to find out what this Chucky guy knew. I mean, they got the surveillance cameras and the footage and everything in May of the year 2022 when he went missing, but it was February of 2023 before the family was even allowed access to those to that footage. Now, while there were 4 cameras on the property, the family was only given access to footage from one camera, and it showed significant time lapses. He was at the home until at least or at least his cell phone was at the home until at least 9:27 that night. So for about an hour and 15 minutes after his mom dropped him off, the cell phone was at the residence. How long he was actually there is unknown. His family still searches for answers for him about what happened to him that night. And I don't know if they'll ever get those answers unless something were to happen that they were to be able to get onto that property. You have to kind of look at it in 2 different ways. In one way, people have the right to refuse to let people onto their property, but on the other side of the coin, if they've done nothing wrong, if this Chucky knew nothing and this man really did just walk away from his house that night, why was he so adamant about not letting them into his backyard? Before I move on into the next part of this story, I would just like to remind everybody, if you haven't already, to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Before I finish the rest of this story, just let me say, if you hear a little noise in the background, that's my little space heater. It's pretty cold here today. We're supposed to get some really cold temperatures. But I wanted to talk about this part of this story, that as if it wasn't bad enough, Alex's life had been so rocky, and he had gone through so much with drugs and rehab and trouble in school and things like that. After he went missing, his family became victims of a opportunist, at least in their opinion and in a lot of other people's opinions as well. Now, this is going to lead to another video about this man and some other people that he supposedly, I don't want to accuse him of something falsely, but it's believed that he kind of just took advantage of these people in their low point. But Ashley Easterling, her son had been missing at this point for 40 days when she says that she got a phone call from a man who told her that he was a private investigator and that he wanted to help her. Now, they hadn't been getting much help, as I spoke about in the previous part of the story. They hadn't been getting much help at all from the Holmes County Sheriff's Office. I will just say this right real quick before I move on. I couldn't find much about this D. Edward Chucky Anderson, but I did find a man with the same name from Pickens, Mississippi, who was arrested in 2024 for drug distribution, drug sales. I went and I tried to find him in the prison system. I'm going to continue to look for that. I can't be certain that it's the same man, even though it would be a very big coincidence if it wasn't. But there is a man by the same name from the same town who was arrested in 2024 for selling drugs. And so that was really all I could find on him. But the Holmes County Sheriff declined to comment. They didn't want anything. They really just didn't want anything to do with helping to search for Alex. And was it because they were afraid of this man? But there was something about this sheriff's office that just made them want to turn a blind eye to this disappearance of this young man. But anyway, back to this story. They got this phone call from this man who said his name was Jim Turry. Now, he tells her that he was a private investigator and he works on missing persons cases. She said he came across as kind of gruff, but she was desperate. She wasn't getting any help. And she says that she would have done anything to find her son. She says that she would have given over the deed to her home at this point to find out where Alex was. Now, she described this Jim Turry as a pushy jerk. But she said that was what she needed at that point. Someone who wasn't afraid to go out and ask questions and pound the pavement and try to find out what was going on where Alex was. Now, she says that this Jim Turry gave her a list of other missing persons cases that he had worked on. He gave her footage of his appearances from a true crime YouTube channel that he had and news articles to prove that he was involved in searches for these missing people. So she said, even though she had never heard of him, that he came across as legitimate. And at that point, she was just wanting someone to offer to help. She says she sent him $3,000 up front for his services by bank transfer and agreed to send him another $1,500 in cash as soon as she was able to come up with it. Now, Turry, at first she says Turry seemed eager to bring Alex home. She said they spoke multiple times per day and that he was consistent, that he would call her every day to give her a little recap. But as time went on, she says it became apparent to her that he wasn't really giving her anything new. He was kind of just rehashing the same information that she had already uncovered and that basically information that other people had already found and given to him. And he would just kind of call her every day with a recap of the same old stuff. So she just began to kind of question him and thought he hasn't come up with anything new. And now, less than 2 weeks after she had hired him, she says that he completely cut off all contact with her. Now, it was around this time that she found out that he had been working with multiple families at the same time, even though he promised her that he was not going to work on any other case but hers. While she was paying him, he was not going to look for anyone else but Alex. So now a few months go by, she starts looking into this man, and she starts to find out that other people had had a negative experience with him as well. She was able to connect with some people on Facebook who claimed that they had been abused in the same manner, that they'd been lied to and just, had put their trust into this man only to find out he really wasn't doing anything. Now, they pushed back on him, and then he counteracted against them, saying that they were harassing him. So she says one of the newest lows that anyone can do is take advantage of old people, elderly people, and grieving parents, which is true. And she says that this was what he did. Now, Rolling Stone, this article is from Y Entertainment, but now Rolling Stone did a story, and they interviewed this Jim Turry. They say that he spent 2 hours on the phone with them, basically dodging their questions. He denied all allegations of unprofessionalism and deceit. He says he cut off contact with them because they never fully paid him, and that he had their permission and permission from other clients as well to put their story on his YouTube channel. Now, he says that they lied about him and that they were trying to pick a fight with him. He says never throw rocks at a guy holding a machine gun. He claims that he was harassed online and that his actions were in self-defense. He claims that they were smearing his name and his business practices. He says that he was simply defending himself. Now, for families who are in the midst of a crisis, vetting the background of a PI is not always their top priority. This can make them vulnerable. So there are reports of fake private investigators who con family members out of cash, scam them, and then use the information that they get to make videos and such. And I want to say something real quick about this. I've had one family member of a story of a young man who I did a story about here in Kentucky who went missing. And after this person provided me with some information, and I kept them anonymous. I didn't mention how they were related to this person or how they knew any of these stories or details. I did not use any names. I was emailed by this person telling me, demanding that I remove that whole section of my video because I didn't have permission to use it. But that wasn't true because I did. And everything that they had sent me had been in writing, had been in like emails. So I didn't remove that part of the video. I don't get I'm not monetized. I don't get money. I was accused of making money off of people's misfortunes. It's not true. I've never taken a dime. I've never made a dime. Even though YouTube sends me stuff almost daily telling me how to go about becoming monetized, I've never acted on it. But this guy did, and a lot of people do. And so a director, Todd Matthews, who's a media director for the Doe Network, warns families about how these types of people can take advantage of them during these times. He calls them opportunistic bottom feeders and says that they prey on family members of these people during a vulnerable time in order to make money. And he tells Rolling Stone that 98% of his career has been dedicated to arena football, a sport he has played professionally since college. In 2008, he faced some felony charges for grand theft and fraud over football equipment sales. And these charges were later dropped, and he was never convicted of a crime. He claims that these circumstances were misunderstandings, and his past should not be used against him. It wasn't until 2018, when he was inspired by his peers of bounty hunters that he worked with, to turn his attention to private investigation work. But he says he has always followed the law and that his business was registered so that he could afford help, like an intern, and, the money that it takes to do this type of investigation work. He says it's a dirty business. Most of his clients who spoke with Rolling Stone say that he approached them through Facebook, on posts or pages about their missing loved ones, and 4 of 7 families were interviewed say he didn't seem to do much work at all once he got their payment. So now, like I said, I am going to do a story on another person who had a missing child who used the services of this man and claimed that he did the same thing to them. This was just something that the mom, Ashley, talked about, how she felt taken advantage of by this man, and he refutes that and says, they never finished paying me. So it's a two-sided story. And so, but as of right now, there's really not much else to talk about when it comes to the search for Alex Easterling. Alex there's never been any traces of him since his cell phone was cut off that next night, the next day. I did want to clear this up. I know it's confusing, but he was dropped off at this man's house on the 20th. This was at around 8:15 p.m. His phone was active until 3:30 a.m. on the 21st. But it wasn't until the Holmes County Sheriff did not start asking for his phone records until 10 p.m. that night, after his phone had already been turned off and had had no activity on it. So the family wondered why they did that and why he didn't go all the way back until 8:15 p.m. when Alex was dropped off. Had it not been for his mother setting this up on that phone and tracing it herself, they would have not known when that phone came to stop working. I appreciate everybody for taking the time to listen. I know this video is a little longer than normal. I will put together this video about this other family and a couple of other families as well that I was able to find information about. And I appreciate everybody for taking the time to watch. Thanks for watching.